in green investments is an area which has received very little attention. In fact, it has received even less attention in the developing countries and in this continent of Africa. A net result of it has been that the total amount of investment that has occurred in solar globally was about $200 billion in 2021, but only 5% of it came into all of Africa. This obviously represents, number one, a lack of, or let me say, a heightened risk perception amongst investors on the one side, but also a lack of development partners, entrepreneurs on the African side. This particular SolarX Grant Challenge seeks to address that. We are delighted to have as partners in this the Invest India Foundation, the World Association for Investment Promotion Association, the AMDA, GOBLA, as well as AFIDA. These are agencies that are particularly involved in particular solar development applications in Africa. What is this about? It's about helping identify up to 20 entrepreneurs from Africa, from the African subcontinent, with the goal of helping them in, on the one hand, getting finance, and on the other hand, getting technology so that they can serve in the markets that they have chosen. For this, a competition is being launched together with Invest India, and we start the process of getting in applications so that we can identify 20 people based on 10 problem statements that we will put out in the days to come. We look forward to this ecosystem completely changing the way in which solar is done in the world. We look forward to work with you. We look forward to work with entrepreneurs. We look forward to work with governments, with the financial institutions and financing agencies in order to make this happen. I thank you again for your presence and request Mr. Deepak Bagla from Invest India to help launch this particular exercise. Mr. Bagla.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Mathur. First, I must compliment you and your entire team. Do you want me to wait, or can you hear me, or do you want to put your mics on? If it's okay, can I go ahead? Dr. Mathur, I must...
One second. Sir, please select English channel from the interpretation tab.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Bagla, you are on mute. Okay, that's okay. Now, can you say something?
Can you hear me, Dr. Mathur? Dr. Mathur, can you hear me?
No, he's not on mute.
I'm unmuted.
We still can't hear you.
Dr. Mathur?
Yes.
Dr. Mathur, very good morning to everybody. And on behalf are all the mics muted? Is this okay now? Can you hear me? Thank you. Dr. Mathur and everyone and dignitaries and friends, a very good morning. And Dr. Mathur, before I warmly bring everybody and welcome everyone, I must compliment you and your entire team at the International Solar Alliance. And I think what you're doing today is something very, very critical, which touches each one of us. And for that, on behalf of Invest India and on behalf of the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, WIPA, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to partner with you on this extremely important initiative. You know, we are all going through the biggest challenges of our lives, from the ability to breathe to the ability to live our lives in a more sustainable manner, and also, most importantly, to be able to create a new green industrial revolution, to create economic growth for the benefit of each and every citizen of our respective countries and the planet. And what is most interesting is that if you look at it, 3/4 of the world's lives today are deprived of even the least access to electricity. Think of a life in complete darkness without any electricity. 87% of the greenhouse gases are emitted only during the process of production of energy. Look at the impact it is having on each one of us. And not just us, but our next generation. And I think what we are doing today is trying to find a solution which is not just to benefit our own lives, but it is something which is imperative on each one of us. It is our responsibility to give a better planet to the next generation and the generations to come. And think about it. When we launched the International Solar Alliance, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, he had mentioned about one sun, one world, one grid. And I think that holds really true. Even today, one of the cheapest forms of energy is solar energy. And what is interesting is that today we are seeing solutions which are coming out for it. The young startups, the young innovators, they are creating their ray of hope for each one of us. They're coming up with solutions which are scalable. They're coming up with solutions which are economic. And they are coming up with solutions which are easily executable. And the first challenge which we are going to be launching today is going to be focusing on the member countries of the International Solar Alliance with a special focus on Africa, to see how we can get local solutions which are most suitable for those areas and for our member countries there. So as we launch the application process today, which will be open until the 31st of March, we will be looking forward to all these startups and innovators joining us in this endeavor. And then during this time, there is also going to be extensive capacity building, working with each one of them and the ecosystem stakeholders to try and see how we can take it forward in a more concerted fashion. And then we will be running, obviously, we will have some winners by March. And then we will be running an accelerated program all the way until June to try and see how we can get the scaling going very fast. And then hopefully take it, this entire program, until the next COP28, when SolarX will be relaunched for other additional countries. So on behalf of Invest India, on behalf of WIPA and Dr. Mathur, on behalf of the International Solar Alliance, and here I must also have a very special thank you for the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, which have joined us in this solar launch. Because as we all know, one of the most critical elements of the solar launch is to try and see how we can create viable, sustainable financing structures to keep these business models going very effectively. So for me personally, it is something which touches me. It is something which is core to what I believe is now an imperative where we all need to be working towards. And I thank each and every one of you to join us in this effort and this initiative. And we look forward to some of the most interesting solutions from across the globe, which we look forward to adopt and to work together to create a more sustainable future and a better life for each one of us on this planet. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, and I take it back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bagla. I can't tell you how delighted we are to partner with Invest India in launching this initiative. And as you said, by the end of March, we would have the set of winners, and we'll follow it up with deep bootstrapping, as it's called, with bootstrapping camps to build up these people. Now, without further ado, I'd like to move ahead for the launch of the website for people to apply into this competition. We are delighted that the SolarX grand launch is occurring and that the website at Invest India would now be active. सीधे वो करते हैं इन्वेस्ट इंडिया वाली वेबसाइट. I also take this opportunity to thank SIF, the Children Investments Fund Foundation, for their support for this launch, for this program, and for being with us as we have moved ahead. I'm delighted that Mr. Shirish Sinha from SIF is with us here today, and I look forward to partnering with them as this program moves ahead. Thank you, Shirish. Thank you very, very much.
So let me start the SolarX challenge and give a brief about what this challenge and innovation startup ecosystem is all about. So as you're aware, that the installed capacity for solar in 2020 was 11.5 gigawatts. We anticipate that the solar capacity in 2030 would actually increase to 125 gigawatts. However, the investments required to meet this will be USD 125 billion. But we figured out that only less than 1% is routed by the global venture investments and investors in the startups in Africa. And hence the need to create the SolarX challenge to promote the startup ecosystem. The International Solar Alliance with SIF and Invest India has just launched the SolarX challenge for the Africas. We would be looking at partner linkage, capacity building, and global outreach through this challenge. The purpose of this challenge will be threefold. One, we're promoting new and innovative technologies for solar across the globe. We are not reinventing the wheel. The USP of this challenge is that it is looking at solar startups across the geographies. Second, the startups get access to international markets through deployment of market-ready products in the ISA member countries. And third, we're mobilizing resources for solar by pooling investments from various investors from across the globe. As you can see, this is the process flow, which I would request my colleague from Invest India to speak about in length. However, we have 10 problem statements, which we would be looking at for incentivizing the startups. We have 2 winners in each of the 10 categories, and we would be giving them a cash award of 15,000 USD each. The hand-holding of technology would be provided in the form of an incubator and in the form of a case study challenge. We have a membership support and access to an African market and the connection with the investors through this challenge. Without further ado, I call my colleague and hand it over to her.
Thank you, Pragya, and good morning, everyone. I'm Sujata. I represent Invest India and WIPA. We are very excited to be here as part of this launching of SolarX Challenge, which is a very important, inclusive initiative for bringing in all our friends from the African continent, both in solar and into the vibrant startup ecosystem. So when we are talking about the challenge, these are the timelines we are looking at. Officially, we are opening the challenge for submission of applications from today onward, that is at COP27. By December 22, we are launching the capacity building program, which will be twofold. One is for the startups and innovators, how do they reach out, how do they design their solutions, and how do they make them viable. The second one is to build capacity for the institutions which will be working with us on the ground in Africa. How do we build their capacity in terms of enabling startups and innovators at their regions? 31st March is when we are closing down the application. That's the due date. Post which we will be evaluating the applications, and the winners would be announced by end of June 2023. We are looking at an extensive mentorship and brain bootstrapping programs for each of these winners, where we enable market access, where we enable technical assistance and other related support, end-to-end support. And we conclude this program in next COP28 by God's grace, and then we look at the next leg of the launch. The eligibility criteria for these startups and innovators to participate is, they need to be at least it could be any time, but a maximum of 10 years in operations with a monthly revenue, and then should have a minimum viable product. Here we are talking about both products and services in solar technology. So we have already collaborated with many of the nodal focal points through ISA and through our own channel and partners in Africa. So the problems are mainly local relevant, and these are some of the problem statements which we have identified. As Pragya mentioned, we will be looking at a total of 10 problem statements. We still have space for input from all other participants and relevant stakeholders. So the 12th problem statement is still open. You can give your input, post which we will be finalizing 10 problem statements on which the social innovators and startups would be working on. And as mentioned, these statements cover financial innovations, it covers technological innovation, and everything in between which makes solar viable and scalable and adaptable. That's it. Thank you, Pragya, and over to you. And thank you, Dr. Mathur, for taking us partners in this great venture. Thank you. And we also have a barcode that you can scan, and we have the little flyers there. So please scan and apply to the SolarX Grand Challenge. I now hand over to our moderator, Mr. Sinha, to take us to the next leg of the SolarX Challenge.
Thank you, Pragya. I hope it's audible. First of all, Dr. Mathur, thank you for initiating this very interesting work on the SolarX Grand Challenge. And at SIF, we are extremely glad that we could partner with ISA in taking this forward. I know we are launching today the Africa chapter of this Grand Challenge. I hope we can build on this through our multi-year program that we have, partnership that we have, to bring into Asia, where a very dynamic ecosystem for startups already exists. And I think we can build on that moving forward. And thank you, Mr. Bagla from Invest India, for setting up the context on how this challenge would actually be implemented. My role for today as a moderator, I have a very distinguished panel, both which are physically present here, plus also a couple of speakers who are online. And what I will try and do is balance between our online speaker and the panel members over here. And I think one of the key things that what we like to focus on today's discussion is to look at how, and from our own experiences about the startup ecosystem and the work that we have done in our respective roles, we're working with either from investment promotion point of view, or also from creating that ecosystem or creating the startup ecosystem in different geographies, what lessons we can draw, what lessons we can share with the SolarX Challenge program, so that it can essentially result into a robust ecosystem development part of it. So just to kind of set the context, I mean, we know from our own experience of looking at other sectors that startups are a very valuable source of innovation, and not just very country specific, but we've seen startups play a key role across many development initiatives. And they manage to identify the kind of gaps that are there and come up with innovative solutions, especially to solve some of the most pressing problems. And in the context of energy system transition, especially on solar energy, there are many challenges and many options that are there where the startups can play a role in bringing those solutions that are really needed. So, however, to make some of these startups sustainable and long-term, there's a role of investment. There is a role of technology, which is mature now, but we'll also need to look at how the different surrounding systems of ecosystem is also strengthened to make it work. So with this, what I will do is go through a set of questions for each of the panel, and I'll kind of open it up for your initial comments, and then we can essentially make it more as a discussion and pick up from the points that you're basically there. So Mr. Jensen, I wanted to start with you first. Now, as CIC, you represent a fairly So in terms of, from your experience, what lessons we can learn from the past experiences of looking at startups? And then one of the things that you mentioned when we were discussing earlier was there's a bit of a gap between where the pension funds don't come in is small scale projects. And do you see SolarX as an aggregator, and that can bridge some of the concerns that pension funds have when they invest in interventions of these natures? So Mr. Jensen, to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting CIC. And congratulations with launching this program. I really think that it's initiatives like this that's needed to get the green process continuing in especially the developing world, but also in Africa. My experience is based on working 25 years in the pension industry, and especially the investments. And the first thing I would say is that I think many pension funds find venture investments as one of the most difficult investment areas. But if you succeed, it's also one of the areas where you can get some very high returns. So I would say that there are successes, and there are many successes both in Europe and US, but are also many failures. So if you go into this area, and I guess you also have, you also know that, you must be ready for that only a smaller percentage of the one you actually start up will end up being successes. But that's the way it works, and I can see in the way you are doing, you have a lot of startups coming in, so some of them will certainly be successes. The other thing, as you mentioned, is that a good thing here is that solar is a mature technology, because the difficulty is actually both when the technology is new, the people that are going to handle it have never tried it before, and the market might also be a new market. Then you really have to work a little bit uphill to get it working. But here you have a mature technology. The solar cells are become worked, and you have been shown that they actually are able to deliver. And the other good things is actually they are still getting cheaper and cheaper. So the power that's going to be produced is really competitive if you do it right. I looked into some of the words you mentioned. I think is important. If I look at it from an institutional investor's point of view, and that is that the projects you find are going to be scalable. Because if you want the large investors, like institutional investors, to come into this, they will look for larger projects. So either you have to scale the project so it's so large that it is investable for a pension fund or institutional investors, or you have to take some of the projects and put them together so they get some kind of scale. The other thing I think is impressive, and I will certainly follow it, is the pace you have in this project. I think sometimes what gets wrong in this kind of projects is that it takes too long time. But I can hear from you that already next summer, we will be able to see if this is starting to work. And hopefully at the next COP, we'll have the first results. So I look forward to see this process, and by that time, you will already be able to change the way you are doing it. If there's somewhere you should change the process, and also again, it will be much more interesting for investors at that point to hear what kind of opportunities there are.
Great, thank you so much. And I think you really provided some of the key points that needs to be looked at. And completely agree that the projects, I could hear myself, projects needs to be more, this is not working. This is working. I can switch. Okay, so I think especially around the way that you described that the projects needs to be scalable, and I think there are some very, very clear guidance on what the SolarX needs to look at. Thank you so much, Mr. Jensen, and I think as the conversation happens, I'll come back to you with something more specific. I just wanted to turn to you, Koen, in terms of Gogla's and its experience of working in this ecosystem. You've been doing work in Asia as well as in Africa, and working very closely with large numbers of young entrepreneurs who are coming into this ecosystem to provide technology solutions and the services that are needed. From your experience, wanted to hear, how do we build the ecosystem of startups? I mean, in this context, very focused on in Africa. From your experience, what lessons we can learn and how that ecosystem can be built? And then a follow-up question, as also Mr. Peter said, that some of them would scale, some of these startups would not scale. So how do we learn from failures, and what kind of failures we should anticipate that these need to be, so that one can actually build a new ecosystem of key players?
Thank you very much. Does this work?
Yes.
This is a little bit more comfortable, so I don't have to bend over so closely. Thank you very much for the question. Delighted to be here. Indeed, my name is Koen Peters. I represent Gogla. We are an industry association for companies that provide solar solutions for energy access for households and SMEs and farmers in developing countries, mostly Africa, Asia, a bit of Latin America. We have around 200 members, around 65–70% of them are actually trading in off-grid solar products. And that constitutes of a number, about a dozen of larger players, some of them selling multiple hundreds of millions of dollars worth of products a year, but a long tail of very small companies that are having turnover of less than 5 million a year, or even less than $1 million of a year. So it's a very out of balance market with a few larger players and a lot of smaller players. It's also a very young industry that didn't exist maybe 12–15 years ago. So it's really emerged over that last decades and a little bit. Originally mostly dominated by Western entrepreneurs, but what we see is increasingly locally owned companies that are in our space, and they're doing very well. I'd like to point out that we also increasingly see, but still far too little, women-led entrepreneurs. Gender equality is a big theme in our industry. A theme which I'd like to encourage ISR. I'm sure you're supportive and really have that on your agenda. Visibility matters. We are here on a row of suits. I'd like to encourage you to to take that up in your works going forward. But in terms of your question, what does this industry need? Well, we definitely are a very dynamic industry that it doesn't have the number of companies and doesn't have the number of business models and approaches that is needed to tackle the challenge that we see in front of us, universal energy access and addressing energy poverty, so that economies can grow in a clean way. Everything that we do is, of course, zero carbon with Zola. What we see here is a program that helps to provide seed financing and technical assistance, and that is really helpful. And I really compliment ISA and the India Invest program that they've taken up this challenge to contribute. Particularly like India Invest contribution in here, because as Gokula, we've been saying for a long time, India is not playing the leadership role in this industry that it could be playing. It has been an important market country, but it should be a bigger industry leader given where India is at with its home market and its capabilities. So I really like to see that, and I hope that we'll see more India pushed investment in this space going forward. Having said that, seed financing technical assistance are important, but we are growing trees here. Just looking at them in the first year is important, is critical, but it's not enough. We need to look after our saplings and our little trees also after year one, and continue to look at them. What we see in our industry is there's a shortage of seed financing and early stage support. But there's also a dearth of equity financing for companies that have shown that they manage a business model that works, they have shown a proof of concept, and then hit that valley of death, not finding equity investment going beyond that. Because our industry, our energy access industry, servicing the very poorest people on the world, a decade in, is not a very commercial industry yet. We haven't seen a lot of successful exits yet. There's a couple of players in our industry that have managed to be structurally profitable, but they are a clear small minority. And most of the companies are still struggling to make sufficient margins to really become profitable. Equity investors have been kind of subsidizing our industry for about a decade. Equity investors are not meant to do that. And so they are recognizing that and are stepping back and waiting for us to step in. So I think two main angles of what we need going forward: more seed financing. I definitely hope that ISA and India Invest are going to stick with this scheme and not just making it a one-off program, but are going to do it and continue to build your capacity of how to judge good companies and identify the quality proposals and nurture them. And secondly, look at the place that you have in the complete package also with equity finance going forward. I think there's also a role there for ISA in making a pitch to climate finance and public finance. We need more climate finance, public finance blended in across the entire landscape of investment. So also equity investment needs a bit of blended public finance to leverage that private finance.
Thank you, Pragya, for moving the mics around, but thank you. Thank you, Quinn. I think it was very clear. Long-term support, it's not just 1 year, you award the prize and you identified them, but go beyond and sustain them. And I think that's something where we could avoid failures. Failures may still be there, but what we could look at. But at the same time, looking at package of financing options, which can basically sustain them, right? So two very clear points from you. Thank you so much. What I'll do is turn on to our virtual participant, and I was wanting to first go to Johan, especially Johan, you represent the range of market players in the Mini Grid Association for Africa. My question to you, and I think this will get to speak to a set of organizations who work on investment promotion now. But first question to you basically is, what role you think that the investment promotion agencies can play to promote solar sector, especially in the Africa context, and what you see are the challenges and how you see SolarX can actually bridge some of the gaps that are the challenges that are still there. So, Johan, to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. My name is John Chehenza. I'm Director, Energy Access Financial Advisory at the African Mini-Grid Developers Association, which is a trade association that represents private sector mini-grid developers in sub-Saharan Africa. So far, we've got 42 private sector companies across 19 markets that represent 100,000 connections within the region. I am currently based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm joining you from Nairobi. So a little bit about what we do as AMDA, before I address your question on investment promotion agencies, is that we create an appropriate policy and regulatory landscape that allows scaling of the mini-grid sector. And over and above the policy and regulatory landscape, we also work with financiers to be able to develop structures that can actually scale the mini-grid sector. And having said that, I just want to reiterate, and I'm sure this is really something that has been said over and over again since COP began, and especially when we're talking about achievement of SDG 7. Obviously, we are in the decade of action in achieving the SDG 7. And with over 600 million households who still lack access to electricity, there's really a large opportunity for entrepreneurs within the renewable energy space and ecosystem, and especially local entrepreneurs to be able to provide solutions that are bespoke and fit for the continent. And the space is really enormous when it comes to, and especially within the mini-grid space. In terms of the ESMAP mini-grids for $500 million report that was recently released, 160,000 mini-grids are needed in sub-Saharan Africa, by the year of 2030. And I do believe that there's a big opportunity for renewable energy entrepreneurs and startups to be able to participate in this space. So going to your question on investment promotion agencies, I think investment promotion agencies are really important in driving promotion and in driving renewable energy opportunities in different regions. And I think a really key thing here is to, really foster, financing opportunities, really foster packages such that we are seeing, EXIM kind of investments, and also insurances being offered within this space. And, having said that, I also want to say that, there's really a big need, and listening to, Invest India at the beginning of the call, there's really a big need to, have such programs, of course, that are sponsored by such agencies. And, a program like Solar X Grant Challenge is really catalytic. And one key thing that I see, in terms of what the program will do within the space is to build local expertise and enhance transfer of tacit knowledge. In most cases, we see, very limited local participation within the space, but with the correct, incentive mechanisms, then we can be able to grow, local expertise within this space. Also, Kun mentioned it from Gogla, there is a need to have, seed capital and incubation hubs for ideas, and patient capital is really needed, and not only patient capital, but patient concessionary capital, so that then there is no valley of death, and especially when entrepreneurs are moving from piloting to scaling. And another key thing is also building local supply chain, methodologies, and making sure that we are enhancing localization. Another key thing is investor readiness and capital raising support to these, renewable energy entrepreneurs. Another key thing is women, and I think also Gogla had mentioned it in their conversation. We really need to create opportunities to advance women participation within the renewable energy access space. And, I really see also the space of productive use, equipment being one of those low-lying fruits, because then there's a very good opportunity to be able to bring in local participation and enhance, renewable energy entrepreneurs within that space. Then there's also a big opportunity for mentoring, giving business mentoring and coaching and especially on areas like strategy development, ESG, and building out robust methodologies, and also operation and maintenance and customer service. So I'd like to leave it there. I'm happy to take further questions and also to engage in the conversation. Thank you.
Mr. Senator, Dr. Senator, your mic is muted.
Thank you for raising this. Dushyant, I wanted to turn to you. John set the context, what needed from her experience as far as the looking at the African context, but you lead the investment promotion across globally. And therefore, the first set question is basically same for you. What role you see for IPAs essentially to play? And how can IPAs support the startup ecosystem? And then I wanted to add was that one of the biggest challenges, especially when you look at the LDCs, is the availability of investments. And what role you think institutions like WIPA can play as far as the LDCs are concerned?
Thank you so much. One quick, thought which okay, is this better? Okay. So first was, let's talk solar for a few seconds, and I believe it can't be better than this. We are really talking about something where, in terms of setting up of a project, the manufacturing unit, the cost has come down substantially, the efficiency have gone up. And so this is the solution. It can't be better than this. This is the first thought. The second point is, when I turn to investment promotion agencies, there are three specific things. First is the entire investment life cycle. We've talked about promotion, but there is a key point related to targeting, really going after those specific, investors. That's one. And in addition to it, the whole facilitation, we can always get projects kick-started, but ensuring that they take place in the shortest possible time frame, this becomes very important. So that's one key thing. Second, we've heard a lot about investable projects. That again is something where the investment promotion agencies can come in a much deeper way. The third point, and this is again stemming from our experience in India, when you see a lot of renewable energy projects happening there, you would see financial investors, institutional investors are really there in some way or the other in almost 75% of the projects. Now, this is where the money is lying, and this needs to be tapped. Having an approach, a right way of approaching PEs, VCs, sovereign wealth funds, having cleanly, neatly structured investable projects, that's something which can sort of really bring in, those $1 trillion that we are talking about. And I think some of the wonderful reports which ISA has come out, the one on investments does really highlight that, this is one, pocket which can be easily tapped. So this would be, again, one of the things. Turning to a little bit on the whole startup ecosystem. Now, I've spent personally a lot of time in Africa on one side. The other side is that I've been a part of creating India's startup ecosystem. We need to create magic. It's already happening in a few select African countries, but there are just very few of them. This magic, if it can happen across Africa, solar can be the first thing on which we could just use as an example of getting these startup ecosystems created. A quick final thought on LDCs and WIPA. WIPA is going to be the glue, which is going to, when I look at this wall up there and I look at, all the ratified, all the member countries, all the signatories of, ISA, most of them are also with WIPA. And WIPA can come in as the partner, Invest India also sharing its own experiences in that journey. VIPA is going to be doing a series of programs, working closely. Each country is something that we are going to work on in Africa. That's one. Finally, turning to LDCs. This is where maximum amount of action is required. VIPA, while a lot of those countries may not also be members of VIPA, but we believe LDCs require a lot more support, a lot more help. Three quick examples from VIPA. One, we've been leveraging a number of our consultative committees, which are members, which are basically the UN organizations, World Bank, ICC, OECD, ILO, and it's a long list. We use all of these partners. 2020, 2021, we did a series of, it was like an year-long program of capacity building workshops for LDC countries. And as we turn to 2022, we are doing this project with 8 specific countries where it is a specific instrument. So it could be about how do you target investors for one country. For another country, it could be how do you do the aftercare strategy. So for 8 countries, and this includes 3 specific countries from Africa. And the last point, we have just kickstarted a project for Francophone LDCs. That's again a bucket which we are really working on. And as I'm sitting here today, back in Delhi, there is a workshop taking place for landlocked LDC countries. And that's where we are trying to, again, come in as Invest India and VIPA and, bring in some of that glue together. But I believe, this comes from the heart of having spent years and a lot of time in Africa, that this project can make a huge difference. I'll just stop here.
Thank you, Dushyant. Thank you so much for this one. And I think the point that you said, and I hope, and you will agree with me, that as the first round of the startups are identified, VIPA, through its expertise of working in other globally, can provide that sustenance of the life cycle approach that you said. And I think that would really be a good welcome effort, which will sustain the startups that come back. We are also joined by His Excellency Florent Joubert, Minister of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment of Seychelles. His Excellency, thank you very much for joining us, and we respect. Let me turn to Vivek, who is online for this, referencing the Africa one, Investment Promotion Agency. So Vivek, to you again, a similar question. From your experience, what are the major challenges that a program like SolarX would face, and how do you think we overcome these challenges to the opportunities that everyone has talked about is huge there out in Africa? And from your experience, it will be very important to hear those.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency. First of all, congratulations to Dr. Mathur and his excellent team at ISA for getting SolarX away. And congratulations to Invest India for being the partner as well. In short, actually, this mission appears fairly foolproof from where we sit and see. It is the essence of the mission, as we understand it at AFIDA, is to create a learning environment, and it has some very excellent ingredients, particularly one that promotes that is looking to mentor, to support startups right through to their first project closure, and that ecosystem of learning is there are things that can go wrong, of course. Now, why do I say that? The objective of learning, the consequences of that learning that we are looking to see is speed of development. Joanne and others have talked about that, the lack of speed in the sector. We're looking for scale. That has also been covered adequately, and I'm going to go into that. Investment security is the third one that hasn't been touched enough, and I'll speak about that a little bit. Where this is coming from is AFIDA, by way of introduction, is Africa Infrastructure Development Association. It's a non-profit of the large institutions, funds, developers, and the advisory landscape that is active across the private-public infrastructure sector. We have about 50 members. We've just gone past 50 members, who between them have about $5 billion of investment already in the ground on investment. We don't find that's enough. We're in the bulk infrastructure, we're missing scale, speed, and security as well. So earlier this year in October, just a month back, we launched our own Catapult Accelerator, which has actually drawn in six developers of large-scale solar, hydro, waste-to-energy projects in different parts of Africa. And the idea is to scale that program to about 50. Where does this come in together with SolarX? And actually, we are cooperating with ISA on many of the bulk infrastructure, bulk solar projects, large-scale solar projects. There is a continuum on the regulatory side. See, the pivot, each successful candidate that SolarX draws is actually a pivot to scale, speed, and security of investment. How so? One is regulatory. Now, most of the world looks at off-grid mini grids as separate to the bulk infrastructure sector, but it isn't really. We face grid problems in the large-scale infrastructure sector, or my members do, which actually the off-grid sector faces the opposite side of that. And hand in hand, we expect to create a better dynamic of and a more clever and effective infrastructure or influence a better delivery of regulatory environment in the countries that these SolarX candidates are based and where our own accelerator, Catapult Accelerator candidates are based. That's one. The second area is that of domestic capital. It'll be a real mistake if we forget domestic institutions. Every country, no matter how small, how underdeveloped, has a pension fund, it has banks. They're terribly inefficiently run. They don't have the capacity. They're constrained by regulation. But really, that's the capital that we want to bring in. It is, there are many people, there are many quotes. Most recently, the chairman of Credit Suisse First Boston, who himself is a citizen of Ivory Coast and has been in the government of the Ivory Coast earlier on in his career, mentioned it is absolutely madness that we are entirely dependent on international capital for developing infrastructure. We'll never get to the speed, scale, and security of investment if you depend only on international capital, only on grant capital, only on development finance from overseas. So these are two elements that have been talked about so far. There's many others. There are many moving parts. And I won't take up any further points. But if there are any queries in this regard, very happy to answer them. And again, congratulations to the team, both Solar at ISA and Invest India for getting this away. Sorry, it's your mute.
As a way for supporting these startups is going to be so important, and not just relying so much on the overseas capital that would basically either the grant or the lending that comes in. Let me turn to the final but the most important speaker on the panel. Francois, thank you so much for patiently listening to everyone. Now you work with very specifically in Namibia, looking at the investment promotion over there for infrastructure projects. So if you could share your experience in terms of what is the current landscape as far as promotion of startup solar related or clean energy related ecosystem in Namibia, and from your experience where we should take the SolarX forward in terms of strengthening the program further.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I think maybe to tag on to what some of the other speakers said. Part of the challenges I think startups face, not only startups but also other potential solar developers, is really offtake. So unless you have bankable off-takers available in your ecosystem, it is actually very difficult to fundraise for projects at this stage. So Namibia is not unique in that in that instance. We see it really across our region. Of course, as we continue to kind of build the regional grid through the SABP, and I'm sure the same trend can be seen across East Africa and other places on the continent as well. We will certainly, from an offtake perspective, open up a wider set of customers, potential customers to projects. But to maybe answer your question, so that obviously is a constraint in itself, but it also offers us opportunities in the sense that I know NamPower, our local power company, is for example looking at battery storage, but also the upgrading of the domestic grids, and of course increasing electrification. So there are a number of actually issues that we can domestically address, and through what the previous speaker said, through domestic capital, to actually yes, increase electrification and address issues around electricity poverty. But really, I think to answer your question, so when we look at working with startups in developing projects, one of the key areas really to look at is that capacity building. And so what we've seen, and maybe and this doesn't really only relate to electricity or solar-based startups, it's really across the board. It's that where you kind of fail to address the knowledge gap, but also especially in terms of training and capacitating entrepreneurs in the space of investment, for them to understand what investors are looking at, what institutional investors are looking at in particular, and to how to take that forward. So in Namibia, we've been rolling out a program called K2G, Knowledge to Grow, and that had a particular impact nationally in terms of really capacitating SMEs and startups in order to not only find their markets and their off-takers, but also in particular help them to raise the appropriate blend of capital. And I think finding those grants, the equity investment, as well as the loan finance, they're all different things, quite sophisticated in their own way. And I think unless you have a large team that can advise you, is obviously as a SME or as a startup quite difficult to cross that particular bridge. So from a government perspective, we obviously, and particularly in the energy sense, and perhaps not only solar, but also other forms. And as you know, Namibia is a hotspot for green hydrogen development at the moment. We also anticipate that together with solar, wind, and of course the eventual manufacturing and development of manufacturing of green hydrogen, but also the development of that will have an impact on the pace of growth in the industry, and also the access to capital.
Thank you, Francois. Thank you for really laying those key learnings from you and what needs to be done, especially the point around capacity building and hand-holding the startups when they come in is going to be so critical to sustain this. So thank you so much. Before I would come back to each one of you for one closing remark, but I just wanted to see if there are a few questions from the audience which we can take for the panelists. So I just wanted to open it for a couple of minutes. If there are, I see two hands up immediately. All right.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est Issa, non Isa. Je suis de la République démocratique du Congo. Merci. Merci pour l'initiative. On ne savait pas que ça existait. Nous, en tant que Congolais, on a découvert ça. Je suis de la société civile. Merci aussi pour les challenges. Mais on se pose toujours des questions. On se pose toujours des questions parce que en voyant la nomenclature, oui. OK. OK. Je peux aller? Je peux aller? OK. Oui, bon, j'ai demandé un peu par rapport au procédé parce que j'ai vu d'abord l'expérience de 10 ans. ça exclut beaucoup de startups qui sont vraiment jeunes. Parce qu'au niveau de l'Afrique, il y a un remonté de startups de jeunes, mais l'expérience de 10 ans, ça nous exclut déjà. Et deux, le procédé, par exemple, de financement, on craint que des autres structures qui ont besoin d'adhérer, on n'aura pas cette capacité d'adhérer parce que c'est déjà limité aux entreprises. Comment aider, par exemple, des organisations, des ONG qui voudraient se lancer dans ces domaines-là pour qu'ils puissent avoir aussi accès à ces financements-là? Comment aider les jeunes étudiants qui ont des innovations pour avoir des renforcements de capacités pour qu'eux aussi ils participent à ces challenges-là? Donc, c'est un peu ça, mes quelques questions.
Thank you very much for your question. I think it's, I'll take both the questions. Yeah. So if we'll take the second question, then come.
Okay, French. Bonjour tout le monde. Moi, je suis Emmanuel Moussouyou. Je suis également de la RDC. Je travaille pour une coalition des ONG pour le suivi des réformes et de l'action publique. Alors, j'ai une petite question. J'apprécie tout d'abord l'initiative. J'apprécie toutes les interventions. Félicitations. Mais je pense que vous êtes informés qu'en RDC, nous avons quand même beaucoup de possibilités pour le développement des énergies solaires. Il y a un potentiel énorme en RDC. Et je suis intéressé à comprendre, selon vous, par exemple, de façon directe, s'il y a des gens qui ont des projets qui veulent investir, comment est-ce qu'ils peuvent avoir des appuis de par cette initiative ou avoir de fonds pour permettre au développement au fait, de ces initiatives solaires, qu'ils soient des home systems ou bien le mini-grid qui peuvent être possibles. Voilà, c'est cela ma question.
Okay, I see one more hand, so let's take that and then.
Ok, bonjour. Je crois que c'est le défilé des francophones. Merci effectivement de suivre cette présentation. C'est une alliance que j'avais entendu parler. Créée en 2016, effectivement, ça, j'ai un peu suivi le processus. Moi, je suis du Niger. Je suis de la plateforme de la société civile sur le changement climatique et le développement durable. Dans une de nos missions, effectivement, c'est l'utilisation de l'énergie solaire par les communautés pour la production agricole et l'électricité au niveau des écoles ainsi que dans les questions de transformation. Alors, j'ai une question. Il y a eu une visite le 5 mai 2019 des experts de l'Alliance au Niger. J'aimerais savoir depuis cette visite, qu'est-ce que un rapport a été effectivement fait. Je l'ai vu sur les sites. Depuis lors, effectivement, qu'est-ce que l'Alliance a pu faire par rapport à ce qu'ils ont récolté sur le terrain? Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Dr. Mathur, I think I will have to turn to you to address all the three questions because they're really specific to what ISA is able to offer. I think we'll have to switch on.
Thank you very much. In a nutshell, the program is about supporting entrepreneurs. So if an NGO or a student wants to create an organization which makes solar equipment or creates a service company for providing solar services or creates a company which would sell solar equipment, this is the place to come. How would we help? First of all, once you provide your application, there will be 20 people who will be selected. These 20 people, together with WIPA, together with AMDA, together with GOGLA, together with AFIDA, what Invest India and ISA will do is put you in touch with the financing and technology development arms. A key issue, as was identified here, is help creating the supply chains. If you are making something, where will you get the stuff from? We will also help you in capacity building, your own capacity building of the entrepreneur as well as of the workforce. We will also work with the national governments in seeing how the national systems of innovation can be added on to this. What this is not about, and I'm addressing particularly what we worked in Niger, what this is not about is the public support that is provided for renewable energy. This is about it creating entrepreneurs who can then provide solar services to various groups of either solar developers or, in a certain case, the electricity distribution companies who want solar energy. Thank you.
Dr. Mathur, there was the other set of question on the Niger and Congo. Would you like to address that? I mean, in terms of more what ISA is doing in these countries, in DRC as well as in Niger.
The countries have to come back to us.
Okay, thank you. Okay. You have a question? Okay.
At this moment of time, I want to take this opportunity, Shirish, to thank you, to thank all our panelists for this excellent interventions which have helped launch the SolarX Grand Challenge. As we come to an end of this session, I would also like to add my words of welcome to Mr. Flavien Jobert, the Seychelles Minister for Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment, and request him to provide the remarks, the closing remarks, as we go ahead with the launch of the system. Mr. Jobert.
How do I address you?
Ajay.
Ajay. Yes. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Ajit, for putting me on the spot. It was a surprise, but I'm very happy to be here with my colleagues from Seychelles. Mr. Agricole has been engaged with ISA and also our two colleagues at the back. We have a project that's about to be launched with ISA, and that's rolling out of solar cold storage in agriculture in the country. And this is something we would like to conclude while we are here. We do appreciate the work that's been done by ISA. I can see from the membership that you have on the wall there that a lot of countries would like to be part of this network, and that you are doing quite a bit in advancing the use of solar power in the whole world. So I think this is something that is major when it comes to contribution to mitigation, reducing the amount of carbon that we release into the atmosphere. And I think the other point I would like to make is I would also like to thank India for the leadership, because I can see a lot of effort being put and a lot of expertise being put behind ISA from the Indian side, and working with all our partners, I think we would get there. So for me, it's a grand partnership that has been going for some time, and through your efforts, you've kept it going at a very high level. And I congratulate you for this work, and also for the challenge that you just launched, so that we can see more of what the ISA is offering. So thank you very much, and it was a pleasure being part of this event this morning. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Thank you so much for Having worked with Dr. Mathur, he likes to put all of us on spot on a very regular basis. So this time he has done to you, but thank you so much for anything. I also want to thank all the panelists, Vivek and Joanne who are online, and to everyone over here. Thank you so much, with which we will basically wrap up the session. And if we would request everyone to just stand so that I think we want to do a photo